Dr. Mark Changizi here with your Science Moment. As you know, I am half Iranian. My dad was from Iran. He passed away 25 or something years ago. My wife is from Iran, and a lot of our communities that we hang out with are Iranian communities. On Instagram and on various places, I have a disproportionate Iranian following compared to Twitter, where there's not much per se in that regard. And I just wanted to mention an embarrassing to Americans and to the West contrast between what is going on there and what's been in fact going on here in the United States. And so I have a lot of folks, before I started, I just did 4 or so videos in terms of the Mahsa Amini protests in Iran. And I had a lot of folks, Iranian folks, DMing me and saying, Mark, we need your voice. We need everybody's voice, and you've got a large following. So can you help? And I was planning on doing it, but it really encouraged me to do those 4 that I did. And I'm always sort of having science moments related to that, but more from an American perspective. My bones are American. I grew up here. Culture comes through the mom. So I'm not really Iranian in the right cultural sense. Anyway, so I did those 4, but one of the responses that I had to give those folks, they go, Mark, you've got a big following. Why don't you help us? And I was like, well, actually, I understand that you're undergoing severe civil rights violations in Iran and have, for 40 years, 40 plus years, depending on how you want to count. Freedom of expression there is awful, and I don't want to compare the situation here to there, but you should realize that I'm censored here at Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, and have been so for the last year and a half or longer. And in fact, it's not even just these private companies that are doing it, but in fact, it's the federal government of the United States which is coordinating with social media to censor those like me who have opinions like me, in particular concerning the COVID authoritarian restrictions. Our federal government of the United States, the pinnacle of freedom in the West, is violating its own First Amendment and censoring its oppositions under the guise of misinformation. Right? This is highly embarrassing. We have people in a place which need freedoms defended. They need us as the example of freedom, and they want us to speak out. Now, I can't speak out. I can barely speak out. I can barely get my message out because I'm getting 100 times less traction at social media than I was before the Biden administration came in, and they've been purposely censoring opponents of the good, the righteous good COVID panic mongers, as I would describe them. So this is embarrassing. We should never have found ourselves in a situation where our own government is controlling the narrative and censoring via private companies. We are no different in kind. This kind of behavior is no different in kind than that of the mullahs in Iran. It is a righteous, religious-like motivation for why the Biden administration and why the COVID cult feels like they have to get rid of the unclean speech by the unclean speakers. It is the same kinds of motivations as we've talked about before. The same things that Iranians have to deal with for 40 years in fighting back a righteous cult is what we have experienced here in the United States and much of the world since COVID hit and the COVID cult rose and attacked its evil, unclean foes. And that was your Science Moment. Get yourself a copy of Dr. Tim Barber and my book, Expressly Human, on the origins of emotional expressions and the origins of free expression itself. That's your Science Moment.